12th Congress to create jobs, strengthen the middle class, and responsibly reduce the deficit, we will continue to judge each of your bills by this standard. The legislation before us today fails on all three counts, and I urge my colleagues to vote against it. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Florida yields back the balance of her time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas rise?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Hundreds of times since I took the oath of office just a few weeks ago, I've heard references to kicking the can down the road. Kicking the can down the road. This kicking of the can being the deficit and the debt, has come to the end of that road. In fact, we have used this term so many times, America has a chronic case of turf toe. Washington is in a state of denial. We continue to give away taxpayer dollars, borrowed dollars, to people who can't afford to pay it back. Our friends from the other side want you to believe that we don't have a heart, that we're insensitive to the plight of those who are struggling because they've lost jobs and can't afford their mortgages. Well, let me tell you what Americans understand. Americans understand that we cannot continue to live in this irresponsible way, giving away borrowed money, program after program, knowing that it's going down a rat hole. Just another kick at the proverbial can. If you can't cut an expensive, irresponsible program like this one, then what can you cut? Look, we're all about job creation. Job creation is the preferred way to deliver us from this financial plight that we happen to be in. But the problem with job creation right now is that there is a dark, dark cloud hanging over America as we know it, with a huge deficit, a record deficit, and a mounting debt, a debt so large that very soon in this very chamber we'll be taking up the issue of a debt ceiling increase. That dark cloud includes higher taxes. That dark cloud includes burdensome regulation. And that dark cloud certainly includes deficits and debt. This program must be eliminated. The savings must go to deficit reduction. We have come to the end of the road. We can no longer kick this can any further. My colleagues and I are demonstrating leadership in this arena, something this Congress has lacked for several years. I encourage support of the amendment. I encourage support of H.R. 836. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Arkansas yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise?
I rise to strike the last word, Madam
Gentlelady
Speaker.
from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
It amazes me that somebody could say that homeowners, American homeowners losing their homes, and us trying to help them to stay in them is like throwing money down a rat hole. I might suggest that we might look at Afghanistan or the war in Iraq, where we're spending $2 billion a week as a place where we could find the money to balance our budget. But at this moment, Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield the rest of my time to my good colleague from California, Ms. Waters.
Gentlelady from California is recognized.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding time.
California will remain standing.
Madam Chair, I rise to oppose the statement that was just made by the new gentleman from Arkansas, the one who claims that he and others are providing legitimate leadership for the first time. I would like to be in opposition to the fact that he describes what we're doing as pouring money down a rat hole. Let me just be very clear about my opposition. I do not like the American people being referred to that way. One of the other gentlemen on the opposite side of the aisle this morning referred to our citizens as these people. Now I hear our citizens being referred to as people who are receiving funds that are going down a rat hole. The American citizens are not rats. The money that we are appropriating through good public policy is not money that's going down a rat hole. As a matter of fact, he knows, if he knows anything about this crisis that we're confronted with, that not only have we bailed out the biggest institutions in America that are too big to fail, with billions of dollars that we loan to them, and I didn't hear anybody talking about that money going down a rat hole, or those people, or these people. Let us be a little bit more respectful as representatives of the people in the way we describe our public policy here. I don't consider that credible leadership, Madam Chair, and I would ask the gentleman to refrain from referring to the citizens of this country in that way. And I would ask the members of Congress to reject those arguments and to look at what we're doing and to understand, as the gentlelady from California has said, if they want to be credible in how they reduce the deficit, they should look at the money that we're spending on a war that we can't win. Money, the billions that we're putting into Afghanistan. But no, they choose not to do that. They choose to attack the most vulnerable in our society. People who have worked all of their lives, who are asking their government for little assistance because now they're underemployed or unemployed, or they have medical conditions that don't allow them to meet their obligations. I stand with the people. I stand with the citizens. The people on this side of the aisle generated the public policy under these 4 programs to help American citizens. And for those who don't want to help people whose homes are underwater, who don't want to help people whose neighborhoods are being decimated by these boarded-up properties, who don't want to help hard-working citizens who have worked all of their lives, who don't want to rise to the occasion of this crisis in our economic system, let them continue to identify themselves. I have an amendment here that says, okay, if that's how you feel, then let's post on the HUD website exactly what we're doing. We're eliminating this program. And let the citizens call us so that we can tell them, yes, we had a program. They would like to say this program has not been started. It has. As a matter of fact, we started to get calls right after the Dodd-Frank bill was signed into law, with people asking about the program, wanting to get into the program, being thankful that we had somehow come up with ways to help them. It's not a program that has not began. It has began. And this amendment that I have before this floor would simply say, tell the people that you're eliminating the program. Let them know that it no longer exists. Clear up any confusion about whether or not we stand with the people or we're going to work against the people. I yield back the balance of my time to the gentlelady from California.
And I yield back my time.
The gentlelady from California yields back the balance of her time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise?
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman from the great state of Michigan is recognized for 5 minutes.
I appreciate that, Madam Chair. Everybody needs to understand a little history here, all right? This program was put first in place in 1975. I was 6, all right? This vital program has been in existence since 1975. And I understand some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle may have been here for either the creation or shortly thereafter. But this vital program for 36 years remained unused, unfunded, and ineffective because it didn't exist. Now we hear that it's a vital program. We hear that we cannot continue to protect the homeowners of America without this program. It is absolutely nonsensical that we are going to put people further in debt and call that helping them. Here's what happened the last time government started going in and demanding that credit be eased and all these other things. And I have some experience in this. I was a former realtor, licensed realtor in Michigan. And I can tell you I've also done housing development. My family's involved in construction. It used to be, not that long ago, it used to be that you either had to own your lot or you had to have 20% down to go get a mortgage and a loan. Well, that 20% quickly became 15%, which quickly became 10%, which became 7, which became 5, which became 2%, which became 0 down, which became 120% loan to value, because we needed to get people in homes. Well, that was not because the private sector and the free market was dictating that. It was because this body and others were directing them to do that. We have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity here to unwind some things that have been done. And as I said, I wasn't here for the creation of this well-intentioned but crazy initiative, but I'm here for the unwinding of that program, as are many of my other new colleagues. And it's about time that we do that. And how we, Madam Chair, how we realize what we can really, truly help people, how we are going to help homeowners, is we're going to get them a job. We are going to create an atmosphere, not a government program. We're going to create an atmosphere that's going to allow the private sector to go out and be productive. Prosperity is created by the private sector, not the public sector. The public sector receives the dollars that it gets from us, taxpayers, from me as a small business owner, from my employees. It's not a government program that's going to create that prosperity. It's the private sector. It's our job to create an atmosphere that's going to allow that private sector job creation to happen. I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
And yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
To strike the last word.
I recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to respond to what I just heard because it simply isn't true. The notion that the government directed people to make these loans is not true. I don't understand what directive the gentleman is referring to, and I'd be glad to yield to him. What policy of the federal government, what law directed people to make loans of 120% loan to value? I'd yield.
I appreciate the opportunity from the gentleman from Massachusetts. Fannie and Freddie.
Well, I will take back my time to say...
We had Fannie and Freddie, and that were allowed to go do...
Oh, no, excuse me. I'll take back my time. Understand the difference. Directed and allowed. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac never originated a loan. They could not have directed anybody to do anything. They were the secondary market. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac could only get into action if some private entity made the loan in the first place. And beyond that, during the period when we had the increased subprime loans, which some of us were trying to ban, Fannie and Freddie were a declining percentage. But I'll yield again to the gentleman to tell me who directed the private sector to make these loans.
I appreciate that. It was an encouragement that happened, and it was allowed. We talk about regulation.
Well, I'm taking back my time. I want to say to the gentleman, we're here in a House of Representatives making policy. You've got to be precise, I would say to members, about what you say. Directing and allowed are two very different things. It is one thing to allow. And by the way, when you were talking from the perspective of the private sector, it's a very big difference. And there are many things that the government allows that I wouldn't direct. There are things that it allows that I wish people didn't do. But the gentleman didn't say allowed, he said directed. And that's simply wrong. I asked because, and he didn't say this, and I acknowledge that, but there were some who tried to blame the Community Reinvestment Act. And I should note that in the testimony, in the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, 3 of the 4 Republican appointees, including Bill Thomas, our former colleague here, chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and Douglas Holtz-Eakin, who was the chief economic advisor to Mr. McCain, specifically repudiated the notion that the CRA had caused this. So we ought to be very clear.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
I will be the first one to acknowledge that occasionally Republicans make mistakes as well. So thank you very much.
I was not talking about Republicans making mistakes. I have no idea what that's supposed to contribute to the debate. I was citing 2 responsible and thoughtful Republicans, the former chair of the Ways and Means Committee and Mr. McCain's chief budget advisor, plus all of the financial regulators under both Bush administrations who said CRA wasn't the problem. Now, the gentleman didn't say that it was. Some people have said that because CRA did have some kind of more mandatory position, but it wasn't for those subprime loans. In fact, with regard to the loans the gentleman is legitimately complaining about, it was those of us on the Democratic side who tried to ban them. Beginning in 2004, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Miller, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Watt, I joined them a little bit later, tried to outlaw those loans. And we were blocked by people who said, no, that's a mistake. In fact, in 2007, when this House, when we became the majority, finally did make illegal many of those loans in a bill, the Wall Street Journal denounced us and said we had created a Sarbanes-Oxley restriction for housing. So I just want to make it clear that there was no direction by any entity of the federal government.
Will the gentleman
appears to acknowledge that when he said, well, Fannie and Freddie allowed it.
Will the gentleman yield?
I'll finish my sentence first. When he said that Fannie and Freddie allowed it, that's a long way from saying that it was directed. Now I'll yield.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm curious, though, how getting back to this particular amendment in this particular bill as we're removing this program, why is this program so vital if it was authorized in 1975 and in 1995 the Clinton administration under HUD used this language? Sorry.
I've got time. You got to move quickly. I've only got 5 minutes.
The language that they said is they wanted to remove this outdated, obsolete,
All right,
and
I will take back my
underutilized
time.
program.
I'm taking back my time. The gentleman's used it up with this book with the papers. Here's the deal. 1975 is when it happened in Pennsylvania, not in America, if you'd been listening carefully. That was the gentleman. Secondly, in 1995, we didn't have this foreclosure crisis. Third, as to was this just a new program, in fact, this program for the 32 states where it will operate is based on the program which operated in 18 other states. So we have had experience with it. And by the way, the gentleman from Alabama's governor praised this program in his state where it operated. The governor of New Jersey, Mr. Christie, praised this program. So this is a new program for these 18 states, but it is modeled on a program that has worked successfully in these other 18 states. And 1975 was Pennsylvania, not the United States. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from California. And those in favor will signify by saying aye. Opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Recorded vote, please. Recorded vote.
Gentlelady from California, pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate.
Amendment number 7, printed in the congressional record, offered by Ms. Loretta Sanchez of California.
For what purpose
Madam
does the
Chair.
gentleman from Texas rise?
Madam Chair, I reserve a point of order against this amendment.
Point of order is reserved. The gentlelady from California.
Madam Chair, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentlelady is recognized.
I would like to offer an amendment to House Resolution 836, the Emergency Mortgage Relief Program Termination Act. My amendment would simply delay implementation of H.R. 836 until the unemployment rate is at 7.5% nationally or lower. Why 7.5%? Because if my Republican colleagues really want to terminate this program, focus on what people in America really want: jobs. 10 weeks into this Congress, and not one single bill has come from our Republican colleagues with respect to jobs. We haven't even had a chance to see how this program can be beneficial to the people we represent, to our neighborhoods, to the economy. I know that shortly after the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, the phone was ringing off the hook in my offices as people were trying to find out how they could get some help to stay in their homes. The Emergency Homeowners Loan Program was designed to assist homeowners who have experienced a significant reduction in income. Not because they got into a bad loan, because they have lost their jobs, because they have found another job, but it doesn't pay enough, because they are underemployed, because they have found a part-time job which doesn't give them benefits, so they have to use COBRA and they have to pay for their health care simply because they have less money right now during this time when you all have not been able to help us create jobs. This would put and provide as many as 30,000 distressed homeowners with loans until they are able to find better jobs or find jobs. Assistance terminates when the borrower's income is restored to 85% of their pre-crisis level. And the assistance is limited to 24 months or $50,000, whichever occurs first. You know, unexpected situations, they occur in our lives. Many people who are unemployed today or underemployed today didn't expect to lose their jobs. They went every day. They worked hard every day. As people were losing jobs, they worked harder. They stayed longer. They became more productive. And still, because of decisions made by other people other than those who were working hard, they lost their jobs. Or a medical problem came up. You get cancer. You've got to go to the doctor. You've got to do chemotherapy. Your employer says, hey, don't need you around because you're out. You've got bills piling up, and you have no job and you're working and you can't work, and now you're going to lose your home. You're going to put people who have cancer and other serious problems like that, health problems, out of their home. This is a program to help those kind of people. I don't know, the last time I checked, Americans cared about each other. If we can even save one family in their home, then it is worth it. The banks have proven that working to keep our neighbors in their homes is not a top priority for them. Don't join them. Don't join them in sending the message to America's workers, to America's families, to America's homeowners, that you too do not think that they are a priority. I urge you to allow this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentlelady from California yields back the balance of her time. The gentleman from Texas.
Madam Chair, I would note that the gentlelady from California's economic program known as the stimulus has helped another 3 million of our fellow citizens lose their jobs. And Madam Chair, I make the point of order that the amendment violates Clause 10 of Rule 21, known as the cut-go rule. I have been advised by the chair of the Committee on the Budget that the amendment would cause a net increase in mandatory spending relative to the bill in the period specified in the rule. Accordingly, the point of order lies, and I ask for a ruling from the chair.
Does any other member wish to be heard on the point of order?
I wish to be heard, Madam Chair.
Gentlelady from
I
California.
think this is directly related to what is going on. I mean, I don't understand, people understand what's going on here. Because we have this program. This side, the Republican side says, let's eliminate this program. And then if you want to help people, you need to find new money and cut another program.
Madam
Does
Chair.
the gentlelady wish to address the point of order?
I do believe it's germane, Madam Chair.
Chair is prepared to rule. The gentleman from Texas makes a point of order that the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from California violates Clause 10 of Rule 21 by proposing an increase in mandatory spending over a relevant period of time. Pursuant to Clause 10 of Rule 21 and Clause 4 of Rule 29, the Chair is authoritatively guided by estimates from the Chair of the Committee on the Budget that the net effect of the provisions in the amendment would increase mandatory spending over a relevant period as compared to the bill. Accordingly, the point of order is sustained and the amendment is not in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. As I stand here and as I sat here and I listened to all of this, there are some things that are missing from this discussion which I think that we are forgetting. And that, you know, sometimes I think that we forget that this is America. This is a country that has gained its power through its moral authority, not necessarily by its military might. And we've heard discussions this morning about kicking the can down the road, putting money into a rat hole. And, you know, the more I think about it, Madam Chair, I think it is a very sad day when somebody from a state with high foreclosures can get up and talk about destroying a program that will help his own neighbors. There's something wrong with that picture. President Barack Obama uses a term that I wish I had invented. He says that we have an empathy deficit in our country. And I wonder what it's going to feel like on Sunday when my colleagues go to church, read from the same Bible that I read from, and can brag about the fact that they was able to kill a program that would allow some 30,000 people to stay in their own homes. While at the same time, when I go to church, I'll have to explain to them why they did it. We're better than that. We're better as a nation. We're better. And it's easy for people to go home. You'll go home tonight. You'll fly home. You'll have a nice, warm house. But let me tell you about the other America. The America that has come to 5 foreclosure prevention events that I've held in my district, 40 miles away from here. They come in with papers in hand because they simply want some relief. They've lost their jobs, through no fault of their own. They've come in with tears running down their faces. They're black, they're white, they're Hispanic, they're Asian. They are Americans. And so you say to them, the dollars that you pay, I don't want to use them to help you stay in your house, in their houses. They are the same Americans that I used to see get on the early bus. The early bus, and then go to work. But now they have no jobs. In part because of the same kinds of efforts we see over and over again about saying getting rid of regulations, no regulations. The regulations that were not adhered to, the ones that were not in place, are the very ones that got us where we are. And that's why many of them don't have jobs and now losing their homes. We're better than that. That's why I was one of the authors of this provision. I'm tired of seeing my fellow citizens come in, your neighbors and my neighbors. People that look like your mother and my mother. People that look like your son and my son. Tears running down their faces. Simply wanting a break. They're not looking for a handout. They're looking for a bridge. And so it is when you go to church on Sunday. When they ask you, what did you do this weekend? What did you achieve? You can say to them, stick your chest out and say, yeah, I stopped some 30,000 people from staying in their homes. Americans. And then there's another argument that bothers me, Madam Chair. They act like we cannot create jobs and keep people in their homes at the same time. We could do better than that. And so I hope that when you go back and you talk to your neighbors and you say a $1 billion program, $1 billion, we were trying to get a little bit more, but even in the conference committee, the Republicans cut that down. And now they're back at it again. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman from Texas recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, we can do better than trillions of dollars of debt that is borrowed from the Chinese, and the bills are sent to our children and grandchildren. When the annual deficit was $200 billion and falling, another gentleman from Maryland, the distinguished Democratic whip, said it was fiscal child abuse. Now we have a monthly deficit equaling that annual deficit. So I listened carefully to this gentleman from Maryland. And when I go to church on Sunday, I'm going to be very glad in my heart, in my head, that I did not commit an act of fiscal child abuse on my children or anybody else's children or grandchildren. We have got to stop spending money we don't have. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas yields back the balance of his time. Who seeks time? Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on the amendment on which further proceedings were postponed. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 4, printed in the Congressional Record by the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Waters, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 4, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Ms. Waters of California.
A recorded vote has been requested, and those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
The House holding the first of 3 votes right now on home mortgage programs. The underlying bill here would eliminate a program that would help unemployed homeowners who are in danger of losing their homes. 1 amendment vote, and we expect a procedural vote followed by a vote on final passage. So again, 3 votes in this series, beginning with a 15-minute vote. This will be the only series of votes in the House today. Members, again, voting on an amendment brought by Congresswoman Maxine Waters of California. It's similar to one that she introduced yesterday related to elimination of mortgage relief. This one is asking the Department of Housing and Urban Development to post a cancellation notice of the FHA refinance program on its website and to encourage underwater homeowners to contact their members of Congress. While this vote is underway, we're going to go back to floor debate from earlier today to see how it rolled out on this bill.
The House is in the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union for consideration of H.R. 836, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to rescind the unobligated funding for the Emergency Mortgage Relief Program and to terminate the program.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Henschling, and the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Waters, each will control 30 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman may proceed.
Mr. Chairman, the American people woke up several days ago to the very sad reality that this nation has just incurred its single largest monthly deficit in the history of the nation. $226 billion, which a back-of-the-envelope calculation, roughly $2,500 for every household in just 1 month. And, Mr. Chairman, February's the shortest month of the year. This is on top of our nation's first $1 trillion deficit, our nation's second $1 trillion deficit, and now, according to the budget presented by the President of the United States, the largest deficit in America's history and the third $1 trillion plus deficit. Mr. Chairman, the nation is drowning in a sea of red ink. If we want to help job creators create jobs today, we've got to start taking away the uncertainty of this huge national debt. If we want to save our children from bankruptcy tomorrow, we've got to start doing something about the national debt. But everybody says, essentially, well, not in my backyard, not with my programs, not today. Let's do it some other day. Let's kick the can down the road. But, Mr. Chairman, this is a nation that is borrowing 40 cents on the dollar, much of it from the Chinese, and we are sending the bill to our children and grandchildren. This is a form of intergenerational theft. The Democratic whip, the gentleman from Maryland, when Republicans were in control, and the deficit was a fraction of what it is today, he termed it fiscal child abuse. Mr. Hoyer, the gentleman from Maryland, said that when the annual deficit was $200 billion. Now the monthly deficit is $200 billion. If we want to help create jobs today, if we want to spare our children bankruptcy. We got to quit spending money we don't have. And so this week, Mr. Chairman, House Republicans have brought a couple of bills to the floor to do something that is rarely ever done in this institution, and that is to save American families and save small businesses money. Terminate a program. You know, as we're coming off the 100th anniversary of Ronald Reagan's birthday, I'm reminded, and perhaps I don't have the quote exact, but he said something along the lines of the closest thing to eternal life on earth is a federal program. So the bill we have before us today is a program that was originally authorized in 1975 and was never funded in its 35-year history. Now, $1 billion has now been allocated for this program. It's not out the door. Nobody's used that money. It's in a series of so-called foreclosure mitigation programs that the administration has put forth, almost all of which have been abject failures, even by their own yardstick, by their own measurement. Number one, the best foreclosure mitigation program in America is a job. It's a paycheck. It's not a government check. It's a paycheck. Job creators are hampered by the uncertainty of the national debt. Historic levels of debt will lead to historic levels of taxation, which leads to historic levels of unemployment. The equation could not be more true, could not be more elementary. But don't take my word for it, Mr. Chairman. Let's hear from some of the job creators in America. Let's hear from the CEO of Caterpillar, which employs tens of thousands of people across our nation. Quote, unfunded entitlement programs coupled with the coming wave of retiring baby boomers will push the deficit to untenable levels. It is a train wreck. Mike Jackson, CEO, AutoNation, 19,000 employees. Quote, the best thing that this town could do to help the economic recovery become sustainable is to deal with the deficit. Bernie Marcus, former chairman and CEO of Home Depot, over 200,000 employees in the U.S. If we continue this kind of policy, we are dead in the water. Business people, they don't know what's coming. The debt, the budget, this debt we have is in the trillions. I'm going to have to pay for this somehow. You know, Mr. Chairman, these are just a few of the voices of job creators. And so I'm heartened to see that the unemployment rate has ticked down last month. Frankly, it is attributable mostly to the fact that we now have divided government. Job creators now know there's at least some check on the excesses of the Obama administration. It is a testament to the fact that at the end of the last Congress, Republicans were successful in blocking, at least for 2 years, the single largest tax increase in America's history. And I don't know any American who believes that if you increase taxes on their company that that's going to lead to a raise, a bonus, employing more workers. And finally, we have what Warren Buffett calls the regenerative nature of the free enterprise system. This is an economy that wants to recover, but since the Great Depression, we've never had a longer recession or a more tepid recovery, and it's due to the policies of the President and the previous Democratic Congresses. And so if we want to help create jobs today, we're going to have to show that we can put the nation on a fiscally sustainable path. Now, this is a $1 billion program where not $1 has left the door yet. And I'm sitting here thinking, Mr. Chairman, if this body, after having 75, 76 some odd different government housing programs that add up to roughly 56 some odd billion dollars, that frankly have grown at an exponential over the family budget. The family budget has to pay for the HUD budget. If we can't terminate, in order to save our children from bankruptcy, in order to help create jobs, one program at $1 billion where not one penny has left the door, how are we ever going to make the tough decisions that are necessary to save the country from bankruptcy? Mr. Chairman, at some point you got to quit spending money you don't have. At some point, when do you ever say enough's enough? We're tired of borrowing money from the Chinese. Is it the future of our children? Is it their destiny to shine the shoes of the Chinese? Is it our children's destiny that one day they'll wait tables for the Chinese? It's not the dream I have for my 7-year-old son. It's not the dream I have for my 9-year-old daughter. It's not the American dream. The American dream is to leave your children with greater freedoms, greater opportunity, and a higher standard of living. That's what I believe the American dream is. And if we can't terminate one program, which the Obama administration itself says we're going to lose 98 cents on the dollar, I didn't say it, was the Obama administration that said it. Losing 98 cents on the dollar. If we can't do this, Mr. Chairman, I have great fear and great trepidation for the future. So I urge my colleagues to take one small, teeny, tiny baby step towards the path of fiscal sustainability. Take one measured baby step and tell job creators in America, we're going to put the nation's fiscal house in order. Go ahead. It's safe to invest in America again. It's safe to create jobs. We're going to get this done. Take one tiny step today to help create those jobs and save our children from a pathway to bankruptcy. I reserve the balance of my time.
Reserves his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Frank, is recognized for 30 minutes.
I yield myself such time as I may consume, and I hope members will be careful walking on the floor right now, especially on the Republican side of the aisle, because I wouldn't want anyone to fall into the enormous gap that has just been created between the gentleman's comments and his voting record. We heard a great argument about the need to cut the budget deficit and stop spending. During the recent debate on the budget, an amendment was offered to limit entitlement spending to farmers to $250,000 per entity. The amendment said no agricultural entity, no individual could get more than $250,000 per year. It was defeated by the Republican Party. A majority of Democrats voted for it. It will cost $1 billion over 10 years at least. We had the Brazilian cotton farmers, and my friends on the other side hate for me to mention that because unpleasant reality is always bothersome. But you know, over a 4-year period, we're going to spend more money subsidizing American and Brazilian cotton farmers than we are on this program. Now, the gentleman from Alabama said yesterday that it was Obama that made him do it. Rather implausibly, he argued that he was compelled to follow this recommendation of the Obama administration to send $150 million a year to Brazilian cotton farmers for 4 years because the president told him to do it. Well, that's a very selective invocation of the president. I must say no more persuasive than Flip Wilson having invoked the devil as having made him do it. And, of course, there are sometimes analogies in the way in which they refer to the president. $150 million. Now, the argument, by the way, was that we have to send $150 million to Brazilian cotton farmers. The gentleman voted for it because otherwise we would be in trouble with the World Trade Organization. But we could have saved that $150 million to the Brazilians by not sending $150 million to American cotton farmers. And by the way, that would include American cotton farmers who could get more than $250,000 a year. So we're not debating about whether or not we should reduce the deficit. It is how. Do you exempt agriculture, as many of my friends do, because they represent agricultural districts? And the product conservatism, the free market, that's got no application to the growth of cotton or grain or many of these other programs that receive so much money. Beyond that, we have the military. Now, we're talking here about trying to stop a serious economic problem in American cities. Well, we can't afford that. but $400 million was voted to be spent on infrastructure in Afghanistan. I do not think that $400 million will be very well spent. I understand some national security needs. I think that war's gone on too long. But the notion of sending $400 million to build up the cities in Afghanistan and deny help in America makes no sense. We are also being told that we can send $1.2 billion for Iraqi security forces. Over and above what we spend on the American military, we're sending $1.2 billion. I voted against that. Members on the other side voted for it. The whole war in Iraq, an enormous waste, in my judgment, of American money at the cost of American lives. Brave young Americans went to war when they were asked to by their country, but it was a mistake for them to be sent there. The war in Iraq has so dwarfed any domestic expenditures in this area that I do not understand how members can, on the one hand, talk seriously about cutting the deficit and then have voted for more and more and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars for that war in Iraq. And now we have another point that should be made. It is true, this $1 billion that we're asking for, and by the way, it will cost, according to CBO, $840 million. Not 98% in total expenditure, 84%. Still a high number, but $140 million is $140 million. So this will cost $840 million, according to CBO, if it is fully run. And it is going to come out of the Treasury right now. But let's be clear. The reason it will come out of the Treasury, as we try to deal with this, by the way, here's what the program is. It says to Americans who took out mortgages and became unemployed that we will help them pay their mortgage because you can't afford mortgage payments out of unemployment compensation. That's the lavishness of this program. We're taking people who are in trouble and facing losing their homes and having more foreclosures, which have negative effects not just on the individual foreclosed, but on the neighborhood, on the city, on the whole economy. So this has a macroeconomic impact. But we are going to come to their assistance. In the financial reform bill passed last summer, we in the conference committee voted to take this money from an assessment on the largest financial institutions. We voted that financial institutions with $50 billion or more in assets and hedge funds with $10 billion or more in assets would have to pay for this. And our logic was that it was the activity of these institutions that caused the crisis that led to the unemployment and led to the foreclosures. Many of them profited from it. And we then had the TARP, and this is money that we voted in the TARP and another set of programs, and we said, you benefited from intervention. We didn't do it because we loved you. We did it because we had to save the economy from going upside down. I know members like to rail about bailouts. Of course, everything, let's be very clear, every activity in the United States known as a bailout recently was in the initiative of the George Bush administration, of Mr. Paulson and Mr. Bernanke, and they were bipartisanly supported, and I agree that we had to do them. We had to do them because of failures in past regulatory policy. But the fact is that in the bill we passed last summer, this money wouldn't have come from the Treasury. It wouldn't have added to the deficit. It would have been recouped from an assessment on large financial institutions. The Republican Party blocked it. Not here. They didn't have the votes here, as we don't often have the votes today, but in the Senate. So I will make this announcement. I plan to reintroduce next week the provision of the financial reform bill that would have taken the money for this program and other programs to alleviate the impact of foreclosure. The Neighborhood Stabilization Program that helps get foreclosed property back into productive use, aid to the homeowners who are unemployed, and pay for it as we tried to do last July, but Republican opposition stopped us, not from the taxpayer, but from the large institutions. And I don't mean to demonize, but I think Goldman Sachs and Wells Fargo and the Bank of America and Citicorp and Morgan Stanley and the large hedge funds, I think they can pay for this. That's what we would have done. So I agree, this should not come from the taxpayer. By the way, with regard to the bill we debated yesterday, and I regret not pointing this out, but you know, you can only correct so much error in a limited amount of time. I talk fast, but error outpaces me when we get into these debates. We were talking yesterday about money that was going to be spent in another program, the FHA refi, and people talked about $8 billion. Yes, $8 billion it won't cost $8 billion, but $8 billion that was set aside, if necessary, from the TARP. And people said that TARP money was promised to go back to the taxpayers. It was, and here's how. Members may have forgotten this, having voted for it. But in the TARP legislation, we added a provision that said in 2013, when the TARP is concluded, the President at that time is mandated to send to the Congress a bill that would recoup the funds that had not been returned to the Treasury from those large financial institutions. And we reiterated that in the financial reform bill over the Republicans' objections. So the point is this. The TARP money that will be spent, if it is on the refinancing, and the TARP money that would be spent on the HAMP program will not come out of the Treasury. It will be reimbursed to the Treasury, if my colleagues on the other side go along with what we voted for, from the large financial institutions. So let's be very clear. Whether we are talking about the programs in the financial reform bill or the programs in the TARP, they are a package of programs to deal with the consequences of foreclosure. I must say, I saw a draft of my Republican colleagues' budget views, and they said, astonishingly, that spending TARP money to deal with foreclosures was inappropriate because those were unrelated to the financial crisis. Foreclosures unrelated to the financial crisis? That is an illogic that I am surprised at. Ideology drives you to certain ridiculous conclusions, but that one goes further into that than I would have thought. So let's again be very clear. Our proposals are that the large financial institutions, assets of $50 billion or more, hedge funds of $10 billion or more, most of which were direct beneficiaries of our activity in dealing with the financial crisis that many of them helped cause, that's how we will fund these programs. So with regard to the HAMP, with regard to the FHA refinance, no, that will not come out of the Treasury.
The yeas are 185 and the nays are 237. The amendment is not agreed to. The question is on the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute as amended. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Accordingly, under the rule, the committee rises.
Chair.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union has had under consideration H.R. 836 pursuant to House Resolution 151. I report the bill back to the House with an amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union reports that the committee has under consideration the bill H.R. 836 and, pursuant to House Resolution 151, reports the bill back to the House with an amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole. Under the rule, the previous question is ordered. Is a separate vote demanded on any amendment in the amendment reported from the Committee of the Whole? On the adoption of the committee amendment in the nature of the substitute as amended. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is on engrossment in the third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
And the unobligated funding for the Emergency Mortgage Relief Program and to terminate the program.
The House will be in order. Vacate the well.
Mr.
For what
Speaker.
purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to recommit it to desk.
Is the gentleman opposed to the bill?
I do in its current form.
The gentleman qualifies. The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Connolly of Virginia moves to recommit the bill H.R. 836 to the committee.
The clerk will suspend. The House will be in order. Members will kindly take their conversations from the floor. The
Clerk will read.
Mr. Connolly of Virginia moves to recommit the bill, H.R. 836, to the Committee on Financial Services with instructions to report the same back to the House forthwith with the following amendment.
Mr.
In
Speaker,
Section 3B,
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the motion be dispensed with.
Is there an objection? Without objection, so ordered.
And I suggest the House is not in order.
Gentleman is correct. Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank this Speaker. This final amendment, Mr. Speaker, which I submit with Mr. Green of Texas, who led this battle in committee, protects...
Correct. The House will please be in order. Members and staff will take their conversations from the floor and please clear the aisles. Gentleman may continue.
I thank this Speaker. This amendment, Mr. Speaker, protects our men and women in uniform who risk their lives to keep us safe in our homes by protecting theirs. It would continue providing emergency mortgage assistance to service members, veterans, and Gold Star families, amending the underlying bill that would otherwise strip away such vital assistance to homeowners in distress through no fault of their own. Whether it is the result of being laid off or a severe medical condition or emergency, Congress has not turned its back on our nation's veterans when they are in need, and now is no time to start. As my colleagues are well aware, the foreclosure crisis has affected millions of American families. Mr. Speaker, we're not in order.
Gentleman is correct. House will be in order. Gentleman may continue.
Sadly, our military families have suffered some of the worst brunt of this impact. Last year, 20,000 active duty reservists and veterans lost their homes, the largest number in recent history. Did you know the foreclosure rate around our nation's military installations is 4 times higher than the national average? From 2000 to 2007 to 2008, the rate of foreclosure...
Mr. Speaker, if the gentleman would suspend, the House is not in order.
Gentleman is correct. Gentleman may continue.
From 2007 to 2008, the rate of foreclosure in towns within 10 miles of a military facility swelled by 217%, compared with 59% in the rest of the country. Right here in our own backyard in my district, the community of Woodbridge, Virginia, the foreclosure rate spiked an astounding 414% around the Quantico Marine Base. Why is that? Because the unemployment rate for our military heroes who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan is 15% higher than the national average. We all know how difficult the transition back to civilian life can be, particularly the disabled as they try to find work. Congress has repeatedly singled out veterans for additional assistance, whether it is workforce training or small business assistance. In fact, the House itself initiated a Wounded Warrior program to place veterans in our member offices. But even with that assistance, the men and women who so bravely fought on behalf of our nation find difficulty succeeding here back home. That's why we had more than 75,600 homeless veterans in 2009. I know a young man in my district who returned home from a tour of duty in Iraq with a severe disability. Thankfully, the modest financial support he currently receives has enabled him barely to remain in his home. But he's only one adverse event away from foreclosure. We are not in order, Mr. Chairman, and our veterans deserve better.
House will be in order.
What if his situation worsens? What if he suffers the loss of employment or develops a catastrophic illness? How am I supposed to tell him or his family, not to mention the thousands of others like him in many of our communities, that we're turning our backs on them? Rather than continue to provide for the needs of our veterans when they need us the most, this legislation patronizes them by calling for yet another study to tell us what we already know, that our military families suffer disproportionately from foreclosures. We don't need a study to tell us the right thing to do. Mr. Speaker, Many of my colleagues post pictures outside their offices of lost service members who have made the ultimate sacrifice in a sincere attempt to honor their memory. Those men and women fought and died protecting our homes. How can we now tell them and their families we're not going to fight to protect theirs? Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this final amendment and help preserve the American dream for those who are out there protecting that dream for each of us. And with that, I yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green.
The gentleman's recognized.
Yep.
1 minute remaining.
Can you turn that more toward the other side? Can you bring this back a little bit, please, so I need to see it? Okay. And can you put that one over there so that it can be seen right in front of Ms. Jackson Lee? Is that okay with you? I thank